What's up YouTube? In today's video I'm going to show you how to sharpen your knife on a sharpening stone. In this case, a whetstone. I have two stones that I'm going to use today, starting with a combination stone that has two sides, a 400 grit and a 1000 grit. The lower the grit, the more coarse it will be, and more material will be taken away from your knife. 1000 grit is already a bit more fine and will take less material away. It depends on how dull your knife is, which grit you need to use. Most of the time I start with a 400 grit and then I switch to 1000 and finish it off with a 3000 grit stone. So we need to check this first. The easiest method is using light directly on the edge of your knife. Where you see the reflection, it means that there is a small bite taken into your knife. You need to slowly turn your knife to see these reflections. Most people use the tip of their knife to cut things. This is probably also the spot which needs to be sharpened the most. It's the same with this nakiri. And as the name kinda gives it away, these whetstones needs to be wet, meaning we need to let them rest in the water for about 5 to 10 minutes. And if you see bubbles coming out of your stone, that's not a bad thing, it's just air and the stone is sucking up water. Meanwhile, let's see what we need for sharpening a knife besides these stones. I like to use a kitchen towel to clean up the mess in between, but also to dry off the knives or my hands if I need to. And of course, before we start, we're going to do a tomato cutting test. So today I have two knives that really need some maintenance. The first stroke is not getting anywhere, and in order to work efficient and safe, we need to be able to cut the tomato without putting any pressure. But I really need to put some pressure here with this particular knife. And I'm also not capable of cutting really thin slices. And it's pretty much the same story with the other knife. So let's start sharpening these knives, starting with the 400 grit. I'm also using a holder for the stone to keep it in place. Now let's add some extra water to the stone. This will help sharpen your knife easily. Without the water, the stone gets dry and could damage your knife. It should be a thin layer of water, not too much, and we can always add more water in between. And since these are Japanese knives, I need to maintain an angle of 15 degrees. Most European or American knives have a 30-degree angle. We put our fingers on the blade and slowly start to move our knife across the stone. If you have a really expensive knife, maybe it's better to start with some cheaper knives first to get some feeling with the process. The sound might be a little scary at first, but don't worry. This tells us that we're doing a great job here, since we're basically taking material away from our knife to create or shape that edge again. Some people also like to make small circles, which could be a quicker way of sharpening your knife, but I prefer the old school method. And depending on how dull your knife is, it could take 20 strokes, 40 strokes or even 60 strokes per side. This is something you have to find out yourself and check in between. And make sure you sharpen the whole knife and not only what is called the belly or the tip of your knife. And make sure to add some water to the stone after 10 strokes, so that it stays wet and doesn't damage your knife. And after you're done with some strokes and you take a closer look at your knife, you will discover that the water on the knife contains some dark material or some dirt. This means you're taking away material, so it's a good sign. And when you're done with one side, switch to the other side. Make sure both sides of that edge get sharpened. And if you have one-sided edged blade, don't switch of course. When switching to the other side and using a different hand, it might be a little bit of an awkward feeling, but don't worry. Take your time and just focus. It's not a competition who finished first. And when you're done with the 400 grit, which is probably after 20 to 60 strokes per side, you can switch to the 1000 grit and repeat the process. Probably you just need to do about 20 to 30 strokes on the 1000 grit, but this also depends on your preferences. And after you're done with both sides, it's time to switch to the 3000 grit, which is really going to give us a razor sharp knife. Put on some water and give it another 20 to 30 strokes per side. And now that we're done sharpening both our knives, it's time to see if we are still seeing some blinking reflections. I'm using the tip of the knife the most, so I'm carefully inspecting that spot. Our stones are still soaking wet, and in order to keep them safe we need to air dry them. So what I like to do is putting them on a kitchen towel, or in this case a kitchen mat. And use something to lift them a little bit in the air so they are drying way better. And with our knives sharpened, it's time to see how sharp they are. And we see that they cut through paper very easily. Now, the tomato. Without putting any pressure, the knife cuts through the tomato. And I'm able to make some pretty thin slices as well. And that's a wrap for today's video. I hope you learned something, and please let me know if you were able to sharpen your knife after watching this video. Thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe to my channel for more how-tos and reviews.